Okay, everybody, welcome back to the Deep Puck Podcast. It's been a little while, but we're finally getting some hockey back. Joining me today from the Athletic Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh's best beat writer, Josh Yohe.
I appreciate the introduction. The check is in the mail, my friend.
Definitely. So we got a lot to go over since hockey's been gone and coming back. I want to talk a little bit about, first off, using the downtime to get the CBA hashed out seems like a huge win when you compare it to what the other leagues have gone through.
I completely agree with you. I give them a lot of credit for how everything was handled, especially when we saw the mess that was Major League Baseball during the same time. The league had to give a little bit. I think the players were very astute in realizing, hey, maybe we don't want to play right now, but the league is desperate to have us play, so we're going to make them give us a little. And things like the Olympics, became a reality for them as a result. But I think really it's a fair deal for both sides. I've had players tell me that. I've had agents tell me that. I've had David Morehouse told me that. So when everybody is that happy with a deal, frankly, it's unusual and it's a great thing. And all of us who are, whether we're hockey reporters or hockey fans or both, we've dealt with enough lockouts in our time as hockey fans, so we don't need any more of that. And we're not going to have to worry about it for at least 6 years. So it's a good thing.
Definitely. One of the things that did come out of it is, at least for the next upcoming 2 seasons, there will be a flat salary cap locked in at 81.5 for the next 2 upcoming seasons. How do you envision teams like Pittsburgh, Vancouver, Toronto, a few other teams that are really, really tight up against the cap, at least for the next foreseeable years? How do you think they're going to negotiate that?
I think it's an okay thing for the Penguins in particular. They were concerned a month ago that cap figure would be a lot lower the next couple of years. So 81.5, it's not ideal. They'd love it to be closer to 85 or 90. But I think Jim Rutherford feels like he can deal with that number. He doesn't have to blow up this team in the next couple of years. Does that mean they'll have to get a little creative? Sure. Does that mean a Matt Murray might be traded as a result, or a Patrick Hornquist in the next year? Yeah, those are absolutely possibilities and not necessarily things they want to do, but the cap may force them to do it. But they don't need to blow up the team. They can keep the core intact, whether it be, Crosby, Malkin, Letang, the names. So I think the Penguins will still be the Penguins a couple of years from now as we know them. You mentioned Toronto. Now, that's a different story. I happen to believe that players like Crosby and Malkin, if anything, are a little bit underpaid, especially Crosby. To me, I think Austin Matthews is great and Marner too, but man, they really overpaid a couple of guys, especially Nylander, in my opinion. That's a team that's really going to have some interesting decisions to make. And oh, by the way, they haven't won anything, and the Penguins have certainly proven that this core can win. So there are some question marks out there, but it's not a disastrous situation for the Penguins. I actually think it's fine.
Okay. So today, the Penguins had an inter-squad scrimmage. A couple of my personal takeaways from what I watched on the live stream: Sam Lafferty is fast and determined to make this roster going to Toronto. I don't think Kevin Churchman looked out of place on the ice. I mean, he did get beat a couple of times later in the game, but I felt like he actually looked like he belonged on NHL ice. I kind of felt like Tristan Jarry needed more work. Not that he was bad, but I would have liked to seen Sullivan switch the goaltenders at the intermission just to get Jarry a little bit more competition, because I don't think the third and fourth lines were putting as much offensive pressure as the top 2 lines were on Matt Murray. The big names looked like the big names. Crosby left a little bit early. I'm not too worried about that. I went back and watched his last couple of shifts. Nothing stood out as far as what it could be injury relating. It could be just cramps or anything simple. So I'm not overly concerned about that yet. But what was your big takeaways from today?
Yeah, well, we'll start with Crosby because that's always the news. He did leave about halfway through the second period of the scrimmage, didn't come back. Mike Sullivan just said that because of the NHL rules right now, he's not allowed to comment on anything, which, okay, isn't that convenient for all injury reports moving forward? But
Yeah.
I guess that's the way it will be, and I understand it. I certainly didn't see anything that looked bad. In fact, Connor Sherry afterwards even said he just thought it was more of a maintenance thing than anything. So until we hear otherwise, I'm not under the impression that there was anything wrong with Sid. The big names have looked great all week at camp. Crosby and Malkin have been. I mean, Malkin's been unbelievable. He is just galloping around people. He looks great. Crosby looks great. Jake Gensel scored a couple of goals. The Sid and the kids line has really, really been good all week during camp. So those are all encouraging things. And everyone's going to look at the goaltending. I know that's going to be the case. They're going to see Matt Murray gave up 7 goals in this scrimmage. Tristan Jarry gave up 0. And Jarry looked really good. I mean, he stopped a couple of breakaways.
Absolutely.
He's been awesome all week. I mean, he really has. He has been really good. Murray has not had a very good week. So it's very easy to say, well, we got a controversy here. And maybe we do. But for those who did not watch the scrimmage, and it was streamed on the Penguins website, Matt Murray had to face a team that included Crosby, Malkin, both of the top 2 lines, Letang, whereas Jarry was facing the 3rd and 4th line. So one team was stacked, and the other one, frankly, was not. So let's keep that in mind before we bash Matt Murray too much. And the last thing, and you said it, Sam Lafferty, he was tremendous today. I mean, his speed is noticeable, and I'm sure I was there in person watching it, and you were watching it on your computer. I mean, I'm sure you noticed he was one of the fastest guys on the ice. And he looked like that in October last year. I mean, he was so good in the first month, and he kind of faded after that. He wasn't bad, but I didn't notice him as much. It was nice to see that. And he's been pretty good all week. I don't think he's in the top 12 if everyone's healthy. But, boy, he'll be in the lineup in a hurry if somebody gets banged up. And I don't think they're going to be hurt by his presence. I really like what I see from him.
Absolutely. Another guy that stood out a little bit to me, Teddy Bluger taking faceoffs. I noticed through the first half of the scrimmage, I think he won probably 4 or 5 faceoffs in a row against Sid. And we know that Sid's one of the best in the faceoff circles. So to see Teddy Bluger winning faceoffs against Sid like that, whether Sid was given a little bit or not, you know, cheating it as much as he would in road games, but Teddy Bluger looked really good in the faceoff circle.
Yeah, that's a keen observation on your part. I actually noticed that too. And, I really like Teddy. He's a good player. He is a really good 4th line center who has the potential, I think, to be something more. And we know when those 3 guys, Bluger, Tanev, and Zach Aston-Reese are together, that's a very good 4th line. It has been all season. But the one area of concern for me has been Teddy Bluger and his face-off work. It hasn't been horrible, but you'd like to see him get better in that regard, especially because, he's going to have a lot of penalty killing time and a lot of defensive zone draws. That line gets a lot of starts in the Penguins' territory on faceoffs. So, yeah, you can't have him losing 55% of draws. That becomes a problem. And the thing about faceoffs, I think more than just about any other skill in the NHL, you can get better on faceoffs if you just work at it all the time. You really can. I've seen it over the years with all of the Penguins' best centers. And Teddy Bluger, he literally works harder than anyone. I mean, he is on the ice forever. They have to come get him after, an hour after practice sometimes because he'll still be out there. So I promise you he will be better at faceoffs here as time goes on.
Yeah, for sure. Connor Sherry seeing the ice really well. He had 3 assists in the scrimmage. I think he's seeing the ice really well. I know the gold team was a little bit shorthanded as far as how the personnel aligned, but I don't think they looked out of sorts until late in the second half. I think through the first half of the scrimmage, they kind of stayed in the game pretty well, and then it kind of got out of hand a little bit around probably 10 minutes left to go in the scrimmage. But I like their depth. I like the way they look, and I think they could be a tough out in the playoffs.
Well, I will say, for this scrimmage, remember, it was supposed to be like 15 versus 15, and with 9 guys out right now, it became just 2 lines versus 2 lines, and they were getting pretty exhausted by the end of it, I think.
Yeah.
But just an overall thought on the Penguins and what I have seen during training camp this week. I hate to sound too optimistic because God knows anything can happen in a playoff tournament like this. But I have been really, really impressed. Their best players all look fantastic to me. They are clearly in great condition. John Marino, you didn't notice Marino much in the scrimmage today because he had to face Crosby and Malkin all day, but he has had a great first week. He's looked even better to me in camp than he did during his rookie season, which was pretty extraordinary, as we all know. I don't see many weak links on this team right now. I absolutely think they're a legitimate contender to make a Stanley Cup run. I think my only concern is the goaltending, and I know they're both capable, but the fact is Jarry hasn't done it before, and Murray, frankly, hasn't looked himself all season, really, for the last couple of years. Let's be honest. He's been, I think, pretty ordinary. Goaltending could be their undoing in the playoffs, but they're both capable of being outstanding. So I think it's a matter of Sullivan knowing which guy to choose, and one of the two of those guys getting hot. But as good as the Eastern Conference is, I wouldn't want to play the Penguins if I were Tampa or Boston or Philly or Washington. I really wouldn't. I think all of those teams have a great chance, and the Penguins are right there.
Yeah, I think the East is still a little bit deeper than the West as far as the top of the league standings go. One other thing that I want to touch on is I know Jack Johnson gets a lot of hate, and not a lot of people like to give him his accolades when it's just due. But the 3-on-1 breakaway that McCann started from the neutral zone on when Jack Johnson was the only defenseman back, his positioning to take away the passing lane for McCann and force him to shoot, and Tristan Jarry made a really nice glove save on him. Kind of didn't get noticed and didn't get a lot said in the broadcast, but it was something that I noticed that it kind of forced McCann's hand and forced him to shoot, and I thought it was a really nice play from him.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, and he's been fine in camp. I mean, Jack, listen, if I ever tweet anything nice about Jack Johnson, half of the fan base has a meltdown, and the analytics community tells me I'm an idiot. And you know what I think Jack Johnson is? I think he's a number 6 defenseman. I do, and I know he's not pretty to watch, and he's not a great skater at this stage. I agree with that. If he plays 15 minutes and kills some penalties for you, I think he's fine. And for what it's worth, he does have a history of elevating his game a bit in the postseason. Didn't play particularly well against the Islanders last year, but he was on the second pairing last year too. He'll be on the third pairing with Schultz, and those two have struggled at times. There's no question. So it'll be worth keeping an eye on them to see how they perform. But I don't think Jack's going to kill the Penguins. I really don't. And the blue line to me in general looks pretty good. And just the difference John Marino's presence has made on the blue line, it changes everything. To me, it's kind of an average blue line if you take him away. It's not a bad one. It's just okay. But the way that kid has played, I mean, in a lot of years, he might be the rookie of the year. It just so happens it's an extraordinary crop of rookie defensemen. But he has really elevated that blue line to me. And I just think it's a good group with really a lot of depth. If Ruido and Ricola are your 7 and 8 guys, that's pretty darn good.
Yeah. And for what that's worth, they did do 2 5-minute sessions of basically a major power play, and through both of those sessions the penalty kill was 100% successful and didn't give up a single goal on the power play, with Dumoulin and Jack Johnson anchoring the blue line on that penalty kill. So I thought that was a really good sign as well.
Yeah, and you do see that sometimes early in camp. It often takes power plays a little while to get going. And you can see the Penguins' top unit without Patrick Hornquist and with Jared McCann on it. They're kind of tinkering with what they want to do. But you know what? The Penguins are a fairly good penalty-killing team, and they have a lot of guys who specialize in that area. Brian Dumoulin's a great penalty killer. Jack Johnson, especially against 5-on-3s, is a really good penalty killer. Yep. Teddy Bluger has emerged as a good penalty killer. Brandon Tanev is just outstanding. Brandon Tanev gives you a 2-on-1 shorthanded every game. So they should be a good penalty-killing team. They have a lot of players who specialize in that area. I think Jacques Martin does a wonderful job with that unit as well. So you expect them to be good, and I think they will be. And I don't have to tell you, in a best-of-5 series, even though the Penguins will be gigantic favorites against Montreal, special teams can tilt things in a hurry one way or the other. So they need to be prepared. They've worked on the power play and the PK a good bit during this week. I'm sure they will continue to do so. But I think both special teams units have a chance to be really good for them.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's move on a little bit. You're probably getting everything packed up, be leaving late next week, heading to Toronto, I would assume.
No, actually, I'm not. And we have a policy at the Athletic. All the American writers are not going for now. And in fact, there aren't really many writers at all going. Crossing the border is almost impossible right now. Mm-hmm. And the NHL's made it pretty clear they don't want us there, even though we are technically allowed in the building if we're able to cross the border. So we're not even allowed to interview players in Toronto if we go. The only interviews would be on Zoom like we're doing right now. So very few writers are actually going. Now, I will tell you, if the Penguins make it to the conference final in Edmonton, I will probably be up there at that point. And I always like to be around the team. But at this point in time, there's really not much benefit at all. So maybe I'll come down to Florida. We'll have a big party and watch a game together. I don't know. We'll think of something.
Yeah, we'll do it for sure.
Maybe I'll stay away from Florida right now, actually, the way things are going there. I don't know.
Yeah, it's day-to-day down here, man, for sure. Okay, so were you surprised by the number of opt-outs? Or did you expect more or expect less? Because I thought it ended up being a little bit lower than what I was anticipating it being. I assumed there was going to be a few more players that might have taken that option, but how did you see that one?
Yeah, I had no idea what to expect. I assumed there would be a few, and there were. Not really many big names for sure. I know Carl Alsner announced he was opting out. Well, he wasn't going to be playing anyway, so guys like that, it's no big deal. And I certainly don't blame anyone who wants to opt out. A lot of people will say, well, these are fine-tuned professional athletes. They're not going to get sick by COVID-19, and that's probably true. But, hey, some of them have children who have asthma or are caretakers for elderly people. So we need to consider that. And if anybody wants to opt out, I think they should not receive any criticism at all. But not many players did. There were a lot of rumors out there. I heard rumors about Alex Pietrangelo, who his wife recently had triplets. He's an unrestricted free agent this summer. I heard some talk that maybe he didn't really want to play. And, man, that's the captain of the defending Stanley Cup champions. What a story that would be if he opted out. But
yeah, that would have made front page a lot.
Yeah, you're not kidding. It's tough, though. It's not an easy decision for these guys. Yes, it's their job and it's what they love. But a lot of them are, frankly, independently wealthy. They don't need to worry about their next paycheck. And if they're especially invested in, being safe and taking care of those around them, you can see how the thought would enter their mind. But that said, boy, if you have a chance to win the Stanley Cup, that just does things for hockey players. I mean, it just does. It's a special kind of power. And I haven't heard of anybody wanting to opt out on any of the good teams, any of the real contenders, the Penguins or the Capitals or the Lightning.
Boston had an opt-out, but it was a bubble guy at best.
Right. So, I mean, for the most part, and I can tell you just the attendance that the Penguins had daily at those optional workouts, every single guy on the team was there. They all want to be there. That's very clear. Even Chris Letang, who, has serious medical issues in his past. Yep. He was the one guy that you thought, boy, I wonder if he will opt out. And he didn't even think about it. I don't think the doctors cleared him pretty early on in the process, and he made it very clear that he will play, and obviously that's a good thing for the Penguins.
Yeah, that blue line is definitely a whole lot more concrete with him back there. Okay, so let's take a look around the league and see where your mind's at with each one of these series. We could start out in the West, Chicago, Edmonton.
It's interesting. I mean, Edmonton deserves to be the favorite. They were the superior team during the regular season for sure. But I think that's a scary series for Edmonton. The Blackhawks still have some top-tier talent. Maybe they aren't obviously the roster that they were a few years ago, but, when you still have Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane, that gets your attention. How can it not? So I guess I'll pick Edmonton in that series probably. But I don't know. If I'm Edmonton, that's still a little bit scary. There's a lot of Stanley Cup rings on that other team.
Yeah, I mean, I was leaning either way with this, but with Corey Crawford still not being
Yeah.
cleared to return, I think that kind of leans me a little bit more towards Edmonton. Draisaitl and McDavid's going to be matchup nightmares for most coaches, especially since they kind of work independently of each other now. They're working, as a top six unit versus just stacking that one line. With Athanasio in there, that's the first time in his career that he's really playing meaningful hockey this time of year. Well, I guess anybody this time of year, but playing playoff hockey pretty much for the first time in his career. I think that's he's gonna be pretty charged up. So I'm kind of leaning towards Edmonton in that series as well.
Yeah, boy, a lot of speed on that Edmonton team. They get to play on their own rink as well, which I don't know if that's a huge advantage, but it certainly doesn't hurt them. So yeah, I kind of hope Edmonton makes a run. By the way, they're fun to watch. They really are. It'd be cool to see McDavid make a bit of a run through the West. I think that would certainly be good for the game to get him on national television as much as possible.
Yeah, how much fun would an Edmonton-Pittsburgh final would be? It would be like the 08-09 or like the 07-08 and then the 08-09 where
yep.
Kind of Zetterberg finally giving up the mantle to Crosby as the legit best player in hockey at that point. I think that was like the turning point those back-to-back years, and it'd be fun to see something like that with Pittsburgh and Edmonton over the next couple of years. Winnipeg, Calgary. This is a series where I could just flip a coin on, and really, I think that's where it's going to land.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I would not put any money one way or the other on this. For some reason, I feel myself leaning toward Calgary. Maybe I don't really like Winnipeg's blue line very much, but it's just a total coin toss. I don't know. It's good for Western Canada to have a couple of those teams playing one another at least, but I don't really view either of those teams as a legitimate contender to come out of the West. But they're both kind of fun to watch, so it could be an entertaining series.
Yeah, Winnipeg is the team that I follow the most closely out of the Western Conference. Been a huge Blake Wheeler fan for many, many years. So I think Winnipeg has the edge in goaltending. I think Connor Hellebuck should probably run away with the Vezina this year. It's probably close between him and Rask, but I'm still leaning towards Hellebuck, and I actually would have put Hellebuck on my Hart Trophy ballot if I had one, if I'm being honest. But yeah, the blue line is what scares me the most about Winnipeg, but I'm still leaning towards Winnipeg in this series.
Well, it'll be fun to watch, and that Winnipeg top line is awesome. I will say that. I think that was Laine and Wheeler and Scheifele all playing together right now, I believe. I think I heard that.
I think Connor was on the top pairing with Scheifele and Wheeler.
Well,
nonetheless, Laine is the second line guy.
I don't know if Winnipeg's good enough to make a run, but they've got a top six. I know that.
Yeah, especially Connor and Laine are two of the best young wingers in this league right now, I think, and they're both on the same roster, so that makes it a little bit scary. Arizona, Nashville. This is one that I don't think I'm leaning the same way as most of the populars.
Are you leaning toward Phil Kessel emerging with a series victory?
Yes, I am.
I actually might be on board with you there. I don't think Nashville's that good. I just think their window is kind of closed. They don't do much for me. Arizona, they had a nice start. The Hall trade did not really work. They seemed kind of disjointed after that, but they've had time to kind of reassess. And we do know this about Phil Kessel. And he didn't have a good year. I don't think he's the same player he was a couple of years ago. I truly believe that. However, he always shows up in big games. He's done it forever. I think he might make a difference. I might have a feeling about the Coyotes. I admit I'm a Rick Tocchet fan, so I always kind of pull for them. So I might have a rooting interest. Really tight series, but I might like Arizona a little bit in that one.
I'm thinking that too. I feel like Taylor Hall's value has been decreasing ever since his MVP season a few years ago. He's coming up on unrestricted free agency. With the salary cap being what it is, there's talks. I know Elliot Friedman mentioned a couple of weeks ago that, Taylor Hall might be more willing to take a more team-friendly deal to end up on a competitive team. But I think if Taylor Hall has a lackluster playoff performance, then maybe contenders aren't really looking at him to improve their roster. I don't think he's a bad player. I think he's still probably top 5 winger in the NHL. But he hasn't really shown a lot over the past 2 years.
I don't think he's quite the player he was during the MVP season, but I also don't think he's as kind of ordinary as he's looked most of this season. I think he's an impactful player. I don't know about top 5 wing. There's a lot of great wingers. I mean, you could, maybe, I don't know. But any team would like to have him. But yeah, this is a big postseason for a guy like him. I mean, what is his value with, the salary cap going to be a little lower than it would have been otherwise?
Yep.
I don't know. There will certainly be a market for him. Things don't really seem to have worked out in Arizona for him, though. That surprises me a little bit. Rick Tocchet, he knows how to work with star players. Ask Phil Kessel. Ask Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin if they like playing for Rick Tocchet. They will very emphatically say, yes, they did. So, interesting. But Arizona, listen, the West isn't that good. I mean, teams like Arizona, they could win a couple of rounds, and it wouldn't shock me. They have such a good defensive structure. They have pretty good goaltending. I don't know. They're kind of an interesting team. But, yeah, Hall needs to be better. There's no question about that.
Yeah. For my money in the West, I think Dallas and Arizona are probably neck and neck for having the best goaltending tandem in the Western Conference. I think those two teams can lean pretty heavily on their goaltenders to get them throw around if they need to. And that's where I'm leaning towards with Arizona, because I don't think Nashville has a ton of firepower. They're not going to overwhelm you offensively. Their blue line is, I mean, it's hard to look at another team's blue line and say there's a deeper blue line in the league other than Nashville's. Maybe Philadelphia's close, but yeah, that's where I'm leaning with that series, and that's how I'm landing on Arizona right now.
It's not a bad pick. It definitely is. And Nashville I just don't know if Nashville can score enough. I don't love their forwards. You're right, their blue line's great, but I don't know. There's something kind of stale about them in my view.
Yeah, agreed. Last series in the West is Minnesota-Vancouver.
Well, I hope Vancouver wins because I find them far more entertaining to watch. And I actually think I might pick them. I don't think Minnesota's any good. They've got some pieces. I give them credit. They had that bad start, and they kind of, got it together a little bit. But Billy Guerin's got his work cut out for him, I think, in the long run to really make that team a contender. Vancouver, boy, that's a team that can really play. JT Miller, really sneaky under the radar, had a wonderful season.
Yep.
Of course, they've got some legitimate talent there. I find myself leaning a little bit toward Vancouver.
I'm leaning towards Vancouver as well. I think that top 6 is phenomenal. Besser, Horvat, Pedersen, JT Miller, like you mentioned. Tyler Toffoli came in there at the deadline and kind of an immediate impact out there with them. So I like that. Little bit of question marks on their blue line behind Quinn Hughes. So there's a little bit of question marks there. I think Markstrom's been pretty fantastic, steady as always for the past couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Minnesota, if there's any team that really got hurt by the season pausing when it paused, it was Minnesota, because they were really kind of starting to get into a stride and get into a groove, and then the season pausing. And I think that could have negative impacts on a team like Minnesota.
No, I agree. And I don't know how they were doing it because I look at their roster and I'm not really that impressed. But no, they were playing well. But, boy, they're another team, though. There are a few teams in the West. Yeah, boy, should they really be in the postseason? Probably not. I find the Eastern Series a lot more interesting. There's just a lot more depth and talent, I think, in the East. But, that series can go either way. But I think Vancouver has a lot more firepower.
Yeah, I agree. And Minnesota's goaltending is just atrocious. I mean, there's not a nice way to put it. Minnesota, of all the teams in the playoffs, they by far have the worst goaltending of all the teams in the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about it. I'm guessing Billy Guerin didn't expect his team to be dealing with any kind of postseason, so maybe this is all a bonus for the great state of hockey. But I definitely think the Canucks might feast on them in this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was obvious with the moves they made at the trade deadline, moving Zucker and others to try and free up some room. And they're a team that could be interesting next offseason with the amount of money that they have available and just the draw of being basically the hockey capital of the United States. So they might be able to attract some big free agents depending on.
Yeah, and players like playing there a lot. The quality of life is good. They do have a couple of contracts still, and you know who I'm talking about that I'm sure they would like to be able to get rid of at this point. That's the one thing that's really going to hamstring that franchise, I think, with guys like Parisi who are making as much money as they do, and still serviceable players, but not exactly superstars.
Yeah, definitely not on those deals. Let's move on to the East. I think we both know which way we're leaning. Montreal-Pittsburgh, the first matchup. I can't, unless Carey Price just turns into that walrus from the Geico commercial and just doesn't let anything pass. But I just don't see Montreal having enough talent to get past the Penguins.
No, I mean, anything can happen. If I'm the Penguins, I think the thing that scares me the most about this series is Claude Julien's record against them over the years. And now, listen, he doesn't have Patrice Bergeron and Brad Marchand with him this time around. So he doesn't have that kind of talent. He does know how to coach against the Penguins and what can give them fits. So that's something to consider. They will try to clog up the neutral zone like crazy, I'm sure. That's really their only chance. They might steal a game, but I would, especially with what I've seen from the Penguins in the last week in training camp, I'd be startled if they lost more than one game in this series.
Yeah, I'm leaning that way as well. Carolina, New York Rangers. This is probably the series to end all series. If I'm picking one to watch that you have to watch, this is the one.
We got Fire Wagon hockey on the way. I mean, this is going to be so much fun to watch. 6-5 games are coming in this series. The goaltending, there's question marks on both teams.
Yep.
The Rangers were one of the hottest teams in hockey when the season stopped. Panarin ended up, I think, got him number 2 on my MVP ballot. I mean, this guy had an unbelievable season. That top line is frightening. And Carolina is just one of the best skating teams in hockey. They get Dougie Hamilton back as well in the lineup. It's a great series. I was leaning toward the Rangers while I was thinking about this series for the last month or so. But the more I think about it, I still think even though they were kind of the hot team at the moment, I still think Carolina is a better, deeper team. So I might give them a slight edge, but I can't wait to watch this series. These should be fantastic hockey games.
Yeah, I was kind of the same way, and I'm still slightly tilted towards the Rangers, but I kind of wonder how the long break will affect guys like Zibanejad, who was just on a tear. That guy, he couldn't miss the back of the net. It seemed like everything that come off of his stick was going in. Panarin was phenomenal pretty much all season long, even when the Rangers had their down period through December, January. The goaltending is going to be the question mark. And for Rangers fans, it's going to be tough for them to know where they want their heart to be when it comes to who you ice out the first game in the playoffs. Because I think it should be Shesterkin. I think he's earned the net. And honestly, if I'm being even more realistic, I don't know that I dress Lundqvist for the series. I don't know that he's the second best goaltender on that roster anymore.
I tend to agree with you. I think age has caught up to him. Not to give the Penguins too much credit, but I've always felt like the Penguins kind of broke him in 2016, and I don't think he's ever been quite the same. Remember what they did to him? And there was a run when they chased him, I think, in 5 of 8 meetings or something crazy like that.
Where they met in the playoffs that year too, right? And they run him in the playoffs too, right?
They just embarrassed him in the postseason that year. He's never been the same. He's not their best goalie, maybe not one of their top 2, but they can score. One thing about that series too, Vince Trocheck was recently traded to Carolina. He's struggled in the last year. He had a couple of foot injuries, really a broken ankle, I think, that really slowed him down. If he is healthy and himself, he fits in perfectly with Carolina. That's such a fast, skilled team. That's exactly what Vince does. I admit I have a soft spot. I've known him since he was about 14, one of my favorite people in the world. But he's not a big guy, but boy, he's got the heart of a lion. He just seems like the kind of guy who would be really good in the playoffs if he's ever on a team that's good enough to make a run, which I think Carolina conceivably is. So I'm curious to see how he'll fit in with them, but that'll be a fabulous series to watch for any hockey fan.
Yeah, interesting case study will be what Carolina does with Justin Williams, because he'd waited until, like, was it mid-February till he finally ended up joining the team, and then plays for like 3 weeks and then ends up in this long break. So kind of seeing what his conditioning is going to be like heading into this series will be something to watch as well. But I'm leaning a little bit towards New York in this series, but I'm with you. These could be 6-5, 7-6 games, and
yeah. And I expect
might get a Conn Smythe vote just out of this series.
I expect games to be a little high scoring in general at the start of this tournament anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's hard for structured teams to get in their groove right away. Sometimes goaltenders might not be that sharp. Who knows how games will be officiated, but October games are always higher scoring for what that's worth, even though these will be more important. It'll still kind of have that feel. So I'm hoping we get to see some high scoring hockey. That would be nice.
Yeah, it's really hard for goaltenders to face game simulation, and I think that's the big part of the problem is you can't simulate, especially playoff games. Like, you can't simulate that in any practice, especially not practice after being off for 3.5-4 months.
No, totally agree. You can't do it. It's a lot to ask of the goaltenders, no matter how gifted they may be. This is a different kind of scenario than we've ever seen.
Yeah. Next in the brackets is probably the greatest coaching matchup of this playoffs between Florida and Joel Quenneville, the New York Islanders, and Barry Trotz. This is going to be a chess match.
It is. Boy, we always overlook the Islanders, don't we? I mean, it just seems like nobody's talking about them in the East. Just like last year, nobody was talking about them. I don't think they're talented enough to make a true run through the East, but I still wouldn't want to play them. And because of Trotz, I might give them the slightest of edges. Florida certainly has some talent, but trading Trocheck right before the deadline, I don't think that's going to help their cause in this series. Just my opinion. Bobrovsky, he does not have a good postseason history. He did not play particularly well this season, in fact, down in Florida. But he's still a tremendously talented guy, so kind of an X factor, I guess. Interesting series. Won't be as fun to watch as the one we were just talking about, I don't suppose. Might give the Islanders a slight edge. Just I have a lot of respect for Barry Trotz and just what he can get out of teams. They'll be prepared defensively and they'll be a pain in the neck to play against. But, again, a very tight series.
Yeah, if there's any series that's going to buck the trend of 6-5, 5-4 games, this is definitely the series that's going to do it. Barry Trotz coaches his system. They bring in players that buy into his system. Lou Lamoriello has been quite the complimentary GM for Barry Trotz, because bringing in Matt Martins and Cizikas and all those guys that play a really structured defensive sound game. They're a tough team to play against, and I'm leaning towards the Islanders in this because I just don't know what Sergei Bobrovsky is right now, and that's going to be – it could haunt Florida for the next few years, that contract, if he doesn't figure it out in a hurry.
I think that might be probable. I thought that contract was absolutely ridiculous the day he signed it. Excuse me, good for him. But that's a lot of money for any goaltender, let alone one with no real history of success in the postseason. I think 31 or 32 now.
Yeah, he was older when he signed it. They gave him max term, pretty much max money that you're going to get. That's a contract that's looking like DiPietro 2.0.
Yes, it is. I could not agree more.
And the last series in the East is Columbus and Toronto. This is another one that I've leaned both ways.
You know, I know Toronto has more talent and they're playing at their home rink. I just have a feeling about Columbus. I don't know why. Um, Seth Jones being back is a big deal. To
Yep.
me, he's one of the 5 best defensemen in hockey. I think he's an absolute star. I don't think he gets the attention he deserves because he plays in Columbus. Every time I watch that guy play, it's like, man, what a star this guy is. I mean, he can just do everything. Um, and in a tournament like this, Torts is going to have them ready to run through a wall. I mean, you absolutely know it. You
Yep.
know he's talking about how they're the underdogs and they have to play the team that's on its home ice. You know he's going to have them fired up. They were playing very well before the break or stoppage or whatever we want to call it. I know Toronto has more firepower. Toronto could beat anyone. Like they could beat Boston in a series, and I wouldn't be totally shocked because of the talent they have. But they could also lose. I don't trust that team at all. It's just an immature hockey team in my view. I don't know why I'm just leaning toward Columbus a little bit right now.
Yeah. The only thing that it's been swaying me back and forth both ways. Goaltending in this matchup, I think, is going to be key. I don't think any of us expected Sergei Bobrovsky to walk out the door and all of a sudden you actually have a better goaltending situation than you had with Bobrovsky in the roster. But I think Korpisalo and Merzlikins have been a great complementary duo, and even the third rookie, I can't pull it off the top of my head right now, but he was really good whenever he was in there for a few spot starts when Korpisalo was injured. Seth Jones is huge. If there's one player I could ever pull off of a roster and drop in the back end of the Penguins blue line, he would be the immediate grab for me.
Well, you want Jones, Letang, and Marino on the right side. You're just getting.
Oh my God, how deep is that? That's a cheat code, right?
Yeah, right. You're not kidding. No, you know what? You mentioned something too that I think could be interesting in these playoffs. Teams that have 2 goalies, 2 really good goalies, might have an advantage. There's going to be a lot of back-to-back games. People are going to get hurt. We know this. Goaltending depth might be a slightly bigger deal this season than in most. So when you look at the Penguins, we don't know necessarily which guy it will be or who it should be, but they do have 2 guys who can be considered legit number ones. I think there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, and that's something that I've looked at across all the series too, especially after they released the schedule and showed that, hey, there's going to be back-to-back games. And I think it was more important now seeing what Toronto did at the deadline, picking up Jack Campbell, because if there was any team that literally hasn't had a number 2 goaltender for the past 3 or 4 years, it's been Toronto. And for them to actually have an NHL caliber number 2 goaltender now, that's going to help them a lot. And
Yeah.
Freddie Anderson, he's always a guy that starts off the season really well, and then Mike Babcock would always just ride him like a rented mule all the way through the regular season, and then by the end, he just had nothing left in the tank. So I think this long break's going to be really good for him, and I wouldn't mind seeing Tortorella just, stick a dagger in the Toronto media, but I just think Toronto has enough talent this year that I think they should get through Columbus, but anything else beyond Columbus, I think, could be just a guessing game with Toronto.
They should. Yeah, I mean, I think Toronto has a better chance than Columbus to make a run through the East, just because. And I think there are teams in the East certainly better than Toronto, but they can score. I mean, the talent they have is frightening. There's no question about that. So they would certainly get your attention if, I would love to see like a Toronto-Tampa series in the first round. That would be awesome. Like, fire wagon hockey for sure. I just don't trust them. There's just,
something about them.
We saw the Leafs play in Pittsburgh twice this year. Once they were clearly quitting on their coach and got him fired a couple of days later. Then later they just embarrassed themselves again. Granted, they beat the Penguins the next game pretty
night or night after, yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know. They just strike me as a team that's lacking something. I don't trust them. But that's one of the series I've circled though. Columbus, Toronto. Columbus doesn't have a wealth of talent or skill necessarily, but they're still fun to watch. They play like a really up-tempo, fast game. And I think Columbus, Toronto, I think that's really fun hockey.
Yeah. And the guys in Columbus that are with them right now, they've been there. They were there last year. They were the underdogs against Tampa Bay, and we all saw what happened there. So I think they know how to play with a chip on their shoulder, and I think Tortorella is going to have them ready to play with a chip on their shoulder. So that's going to be an interesting and fun series to watch.
Yeah, no, hey, they're all going to be fun. I think we'll take any series at this point to watch. So I think we're all excited for live hockey. But those Eastern series, they're going to be great. And by the time we get to the actual first round of the East, we could have Pittsburgh, Washington in the first round, or Toronto, Boston, or there could be some outrageous matchups. So I really can't wait.
Oh yeah, it's going to be fast. It's going to be a lot of really good series coming up. All right. Well, I know you're booked for the rest of the day, so I want to make sure that to get you to your next appointment in time. Just let everybody know where they can find you, where they can follow you.
Yeah, just come to theathletic.com. Sign up if you haven't already. I think we still have a deal. The first 30 days are free. So if you want to give yourself a little sample, if you're a hockey fan, just trust me. We cover every NHL team and pretty well, I might say, and throw in some Pierre LeBrun and some of the other national voices we have. We don't have many disappointed readers, so I think you'll like it. And I'm on Twitter. I try to avoid it these days because it's a really wild place anymore. But I'm still there at Josh Yohe _PGH.
Yeah, for sure. Again, thanks for joining me today, Josh. My name's Justin. You can follow me on Twitter at SkiMiner36 and download the podcast anywhere you can find your podcasts. Thanks again, Josh.
You got it, my friend. Anytime.
All right. Have a good one.